The alien stared, its three eyes unblinking, uncomprehending. Yet the human in front of it smiled. A small, crooked smile, the kind that says, "I know what you think is impossible, and I don't care." "They said it was dangerous," the human whispered to no one in particular. "They said we'd never survive." The wind howled across the cratered plains of the abandoned moon, but he didn't flinch. Not yet. He never flinched. The creature tilted its head, the gesture somehow more unsettling than any weapon. Of observing, the universe had taught it one rule: never underestimate the unpredictable. Yet even with that caution, it could not fathom the sheer audacity in the human's stance. Humans, that word carried weight across the galaxy, though few outside their own solar system had ever seen one up close. Most dismissed them as primitive, fragile, short-lived. Yet here on the edge of known space, every starship captain, every explorer, every veteran of the Void Wars whispered the same warning: do not approach Earth. Do not provoke the humans. Do not assume they are like us. But why? What terror hid behind those blue eyes, behind laughter and tears alike? He stepped closer. Dust rose in golden spirals around his boots. "You're thinking I'm afraid," he said. His voice carried over the wind, steady, calm. "I'm not. I've seen fear. I've worn it like a second skin, but I've also seen courage. And this is courage." Courage, the word seemed almost vulgar to the aliens, so structured, so finite. But humans wielded it like a blade, unpredictable and raw, forged in moments of despair and joy alike. They were creatures who fought against the impossible, who laughed in the face of annihilation, who sacrificed without expecting reward. They loved recklessly, they without reason, and when the universe told them no, they simply smiled and said, "Watch me." The alien considered retreating, recalibrating its data. Of observation hadn't prepared it for this resilience. It had catalogued countless civilizations, mapping behaviors, predicting outcomes, and yet here stood a being that did not fit any equation. He acted without fear, not in the absence of risk, but in full awareness of it. "You don't understand," it said, voice like wind across frozen glass. "You will die." The human laughed, soft, almost musical. Maybe not, but even if I do, I will leave a mark. Something that tells the universe we were here, that we mattered. Isn't that worth more than living forever in silence?" Silence? The alien realized then that for all its knowledge, all its data, it could not model hope. It could measure energy signatures, predict political collapse, trace biological patterns, but hope was the human weapon no one understood. It spread, infectious, unstoppable. Behind him, the horizon burned with a dying sun. Shadows stretched long and black across the craters. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with dust and fire and ice. The alien flinched. This, too, was human. They could endure extremes, pain, deprivation, yet still find a reason to rise, to fight, to dream. "They fear us," the human muttered, almost to himself. "Not because we're strong, not because we're fast or smart. They fear what we choose to do when there's nothing left to choose. They fear the stubbornness of a species that refuses to bow, that refuses to vanish quietly. They fear the noise we make in a silent universe." The alien tilted its head again, a subtle twitch in the three-pronged crown of its skull. It had seen stars die, planets crumble, empires fade. And still, it could not reconcile this simple truth. Humans were alive in a way no other species could comprehend. Alive with defiance, alive with contradiction, alive with chaos that somehow became creation. The human knelt, hands brushing over scorched metal and shattered machinery. "This planet," he said softly, almost reverently, "this is nothing compared to what we carry inside, and that scares them." The alien blinked. 1, 2, 3 times, its database hummed, calculations failed, protocols collapsed. It had observed countless species fall, crumble, and surrender to inevitability. But humans, they did not surrender, they laughed at it. They smiled. And when they fell, they rose again, sometimes weaker, sometimes broken, but always with that defiant spark. And in that spark, something ancient stirred. A caution older than wars, older than empires, older than the galaxy itself. The alien took a step back. And in that step, the first hint of fear emerged. Because for the first time, it understood why the galaxy's eldest species, the immortal architects of worlds, the silent watchers of civilizations, would not go near Earth. Not because humans were weak, not because they were primitive, but because they were unstoppable. And in the silence that followed, with dust swirling around two very different forms staring at one another, the alien understood something it had never anticipated. Sometimes, the smallest smile can carry the weight of a universe. They called it impossible, she whispered, her fingers tracing the edge of the control panel like it held secrets of the cosmos. Sparks danced across the metal, tiny fireflies against the endless void. Outside, the stars were indifferent, scattered pinpricks in the black ocean of space. But she wasn't afraid. Fear had been a luxury she could no longer afford. The alien watched from the viewport, its shadowed form, rigid data streams flickering across its senses. It had observed countless species attempt the impossible. Some failed spectacularly, some quietly, some left only whispers in the void. But humans persisted. And that persistence was a language no logic could translate. They said the jump would tear the ship apart, she muttered, lips barely moving. Her eyes, however, burned with defiance, reflecting the stars in their raw, unyielding light. They said we'd never make it past the edge of known space, and yet, here we are. The alien's three eyes narrowed, trying to quantify what it saw. There was a pattern in survival, a predictable decay, a set of probabilities that governed life across the galaxy. Humans, however, did not adhere to patterns. They laughed when statistics predicted failure. They cried when hope seemed lost. And sometimes they survived. "Do you know why they fear us?" she asked the empty air, a soft smile tugging at her lips. "It's not because of strength, not because of speed or firepower or cunning. It's because we refuse to accept the end. Even when everything in the universe tells us to stop, we don't. We push, we endure, we rise." The alien recoiled slightly, its sensory array buzzing. Endurance, defiance, hope, none of these were calculable. None of these were controllable. Across billions of years, it had catalogued species that bent, species that broke, species that fell into entropy. Humans were none of those. They were the anomaly, the chaos the galaxy could not contain. She stepped closer to the central console, heart hammering, hands steady. Her crew had fled long ago, abandoning the mission, abandoning the dream. But she stayed, because humans did not leave. Humans did not quit. Even when the universe had nothing left to offer, she found a reason to continue. The alien's gaze lingered on her, unblinking. It had seen the fury of stars, the collapse of civilizations, the slow decay of planets. And yet in her defiance there was something older, something primordial. A spark, a flicker of light that refused to die. "They underestimate us," she whispered. "They see our fragile bodies, our short lives, and they assume weakness. They forget the core of who we are. That stubbornness, that refusal to surrender, it's a force the universe cannot contain." A distant explosion rattled the hull. Metal groaned under the strain of forces unseen. Yet she didn't flinch, she didn't hesitate. Her eyes, fierce and resolute, reflected the void outside as if challenging it directly. The alien shivered, an echo of instinct buried deep in its being. Humans were not predictable. Humans did not fear. Humans survived against the odds. She touched a blinking panel, activating a sequence no one had dared attempt. "If this works, if we make it," she said, voice low, almost reverent, "it won't just be science. It won't just be exploration. It'll be proof. Proof that humans do not yield. Proof that we carve our path, even when the universe tells us we cannot." The alien tilted its head. Proof. That was a concept it had never needed. Logic, evidence, data, it was all it required, but humans thrived on belief, on conviction, on that stubborn, indomitable will to shape reality with sheer persistence. And that was dangerous, terrifying even to civilizations that measured everything in and probability. A sudden tremor shook the ship. Alarms blared, red lights flaring like dying suns. And yet she laughed. Not a laugh of joy nor of relief, but a laugh of defiance, a laugh that said, "You cannot stop me, you cannot predict me, you cannot contain me." The alien recoiled further. Across its vast, it had catalogued countless species, reactions to disaster. Panic, desperation, obedience. None of it mattered in the face of a human's resolve. The universe itself seemed to hesitate, uncertain how to react to a creature that laughed at annihilation. "They think the galaxy is theirs," she said softly, more to herself than anyone else. "But the universe doesn't belong to anyone, and neither do we. We make our own rules. We survive in spite of everything. That's why they fear us, not because they are weak, but because we are unstoppable. A final sequence began, lights pulsing, energy converging. The ship shuddered, a heartbeat against the silent void. Outside, the alien saw it, the human standing, eyes fixed on the stars, ready to leap where no one dared. And in that instant, it understood fully. The galaxy's eldest species, the keepers of time and silence, had avoided Earth for centuries. Not out of malice, not out of ignorance. They had simply recognized something they could not control, could not predict, could not destroy. Humans were a force unto themselves. And when the sequence completed, when the impossible began to unfold, the alien realized why the universe whispers in fear whenever Earth is mentioned. Because humans do not stop. The first alarm sounded, a low, grating wail that rattled through the hull like the scream of a dying star. Every instinct in her body screamed to retreat, to take cover, to accept failure. But she didn't. She never did. "They said no one could survive this," she whispered, voice steady despite the tremor beneath her feet. "They were wrong, and we always are." Around her, the remnants of the mission lay broken, scorched panels, shattered glass, equipment strewn across the floor. Every other human had fled or perished, leaving her alone on the precipice of impossibility. And yet she smiled. A soft, defiant curve of lips that said, "I refuse to give up." The alien hovered near the viewport, silent. Its 3 eyes traced her movements, catalogued her decisions, recorded every heartbeat. It had studied civilizations across galaxies, had seen worlds rise and fall, yet it could not compute this. Every model, every algorithm, every prediction ended in failure. Humans did not fail, not like this. "They underestimate us because they cannot see us clearly," she murmured. "They see fragile bodies, short lives, chaotic minds, and they mistake chaos for weakness. But it's not weakness, it's fire, it's life, and it burns brighter than any star they've ever known." The ship shuddered violently, throwing her against the console. Sparks rained down like miniature comets, sizzling against metal. Pain shot through her arm, but she ignored it. She gritted her teeth, wiped a smear of blood from her cheek, and pressed onward. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to move forward despite it. Humans carried this courage as a second skin, woven into their very essence. And in that moment, as the vessel teetered on the brink of collapse, she embodied it completely. The alien's 3 eyes widened. Curiosity, confusion, and something approaching, respect. It was an emotion it had never felt, not for a species so primitive. Yet here she was, laughing in the face of annihilation, standing firm against forces that could crumble entire worlds. "They fear us," she said again, softer this time, almost to herself. "Because when humans decide something, when we believe, we don't stop. Not for warnings, not for pain, not even for death. And that scares them more than any weapon they could invent." Energy flares erupted from the damaged reactors, and the ship groaned under the strain. Systems flickered in and out, lights strobing against the shadows of the hull. And yet she moved with grace, hands flying over the controls, body attuned to every tremor, every vibration, every heartbeat of the failing vessel. The alien felt something new, a pang, a hesitation, an instinct it had long buried beneath data and logic. Across its long observation of the cosmos, it had catalogued fear, survival, and intelligence. But it had never encountered defiance so pure, so unrelenting, so human. "Don't think for a second you can scare me," she whispered, voice steady, tone almost playful amidst the chaos. "I've faced things you can't imagine. I've stared at nothingness and said, I'll make a way, and I always do." A tremor shook the hull again, stronger this time. Panels exploded outward, leaving trails of sparks that danced in zero gravity. But she didn't falter. She didn't panic. In the eye of this storm, she was calm, focused, defiant. The alien recoiled. It had seen cataclysms, star collapses, civilizations vanish. Yet never had it witnessed a single being stand against annihilation with such stubborn, almost reckless determination. Humans did not merely survive, they reshaped their survival into something almost sacred. The console beeped, a staccato rhythm in the darkness. A final sequence was ready. She placed her hand on the panel, eyes closing briefly. In that heartbeat of silence, she thought of every human who had come before her, explorers, dreamers, soldiers, scientists. All those who had risked everything laughed at the void and endured. "They think we are weak," she said softly, "but they don't understand the universe is our playground. Not because we dominate it, but because we refuse to be dominated by it." The alien watched as she activated the sequence. Energy surged, lights flared, systems roared to life despite the damage. The impossible began to happen. Calculations failed, predictions shattered, probabilities collapsed. The laws of logic themselves seemed to pause, unsure how to respond to human will. And as the ship stabilized, trembling but alive, she opened her eyes. A single triumphant smile lit her face. Not prideful, not arrogant, just human, resolute, defiant. The alien took a step back. Centuries of wisdom, experience, and observation could not prepare it for this. Humans were not merely a species. They were a force. A living, breathing anomaly that refused to be contained. It understood, finally, why even the oldest civilizations in the galaxy avoided Earth. Why whispered warnings traveled across stars. Why humans inspired awe, dread, and fear in equal measure. Because humans were unstoppable. And in that moment, as the stars stretched endlessly outside the viewport, the alien realized something it had never expected. Humans didn't just survive. They left marks. They changed the rules. They dared the universe to try to contain them and smiled when it failed. The silence of space was deafening. The stars outside stretched like silver scars across the black canvas of the void. And yet, inside the ship, life surged with a reckless energy that no alien could quantify. She moved methodically, almost ritualistically, over the damaged consoles, checking, repairing, stabilizing. Every motion precise, deliberate, every heartbeat a declaration. "They said it was over," she muttered, voice low, almost mournful. "They said no human could survive this. They said we'd crumble before the universe even blinked, but look at us, still here." A deep vibration ran through the hull. The ship groaned, metal screeching as if the universe itself resented her defiance. Sparks rained down like fiery raindrops, yet she pressed forward, ignoring the heat, the smoke, the ache in her body. Pain was irrelevant. Pain was temporary. Humans endured. Humans pressed on. Humans sacrificed when survival demanded it. A memory flashed, a fallen comrade, a scream swallowed by the void, a hand reaching out just as it slipped away. She felt it again, the sting of loss, the weight of responsibility, and still she smiled, soft but fierce. Humans carried grief differently. They honored it by pressing forward, by transforming sorrow into resolve. The alien watched, fascinated and terrified. It had cataloged survival instincts across countless species, fight or flight, adaptation or collapse, but humans carried something more. They carried meaning. In the face of annihilation, they chose to act, to endure, to leave a mark. That choice was unquantifiable. That choice was dangerous. "They think they can break us," she whispered, hands moving over a panel scorched beyond repair. "They think pain will stop us. They think death will stop us, but they forget we are human, and humans don't quit." A sharp alarm cut through the air. Red lights flared. Systems were failing again, cascading toward collapse, and yet she didn't hesitate. Her mind raced, fingers flying across controls she barely understood. She rerouted power, bypassed circuits, rewrote commands in real time. The impossible was no longer a theory, it was her immediate reality. The alien recoiled, instinctively calculating probabilities, trying to anticipate outcomes. None of its models matched what it saw. All predictions ended in failure. And yet here she was, standing on the precipice of annihilation, turning the impossible into survival with nothing but determination and a stubborn smile. "Sacrifice," she whispered, voice raw. "That's what they never understand. It's not about bravery for glory. It's about doing what's necessary for others, for the ones who can't. It's about risking everything because someone has to, and if it's me, then so be it." A shudder ran through the vessel. Panels exploded outward. She was thrown to the floor, her body scraping against metal, blood seeping through torn clothing. Pain screamed. But she rose, slower now, teeth gritted, eyes blazing. Humans did not yield to injury. Humans turned suffering into fuel. The alien's three eyes widened. It had seen civilizations surrender under far less pressure, seen empires crumble under the weight of one failure. Humans fought with everything they had, even when death was a certainty. And that defiance was contagious, impossible to ignore. Her voice grew louder, a fierce whisper that echoed through the corridors. We endure because we must, we endure because we can, and when the universe says no, we say, watch me. Outside, stars streaked past as the ship lurched, engines flaring and groaning under impossible strain. Every second brought them closer to collapse, closer to death. Yet she moved, every gesture precise, every thought focused, every heartbeat in rhythm with the chaos around her. The alien stepped back further. It had catalogued countless species' responses to annihilation. Fear, panic, despair, these were constants. But humans laughed, they cried, they screamed, they endured, and sometimes, against all reason, they survived. She activated the final emergency sequence. Lights flared, systems roared to life. The ship trembled violently, teetering between collapse and survival, and then slowly it stabilized, not fully repaired, not fully safe, but alive. She sank to the floor, gasping for air, sweat and blood mixing on her face. Pain was still there, grief still there, loss still there, but so was triumph, so was resilience, so was defiance. Humans endured because they chose to, not because they had to. The alien hovered silently, data streaming across its consciousness. It understood now, fully. Humans were dangerous not because of strength or technology, but because of heart. Because they dared when others would not. Because they refused to yield to inevitability. They fear us, she said again, almost tenderly, touching a panel that had just saved her life. Not because we're strong, not because we're clever, but because we refuse to bow, refuse to vanish quietly, refuse to let the universe dictate our end. That terrifies them. For the first time, the alien felt a whisper of what humans called respect, tinged with fear. Across galaxies, it had seen empires rise and fall, civilizations fade, stars die. And yet, it had never encountered a force like this. Humans unpredictable, indefatigable, unstoppable. And as she leaned back against the console, eyes scanning the distant stars, she whispered to herself, "We are human, and we are never done, never." The universe outside remained silent, indifferent, vast. But inside that small, battered ship, the echo of human will resonated louder than any supernova, louder than any warning, louder than any fear. Because humans always rise. The alien had followed them for decades, unseen but always present. It observed the humans from the void, cataloging their victories, their failures, their quirks. And yet, every encounter left it unsettled. No species had ever behaved like this. None had ever certainty with such reckless abandon. They call it courage, the human whispered, fingers tracing the edge of a console by heat and sparks. Her eyes reflected the stars outside, infinite and indifferent. I call it stubbornness, a refusal to let the universe tell me what I can't do. Outside the viewport, the alien tilted its head as if it could see her defiance radiating beyond the ship. It had seen countless species face annihilation, had watched civilizations crumble under the weight of inevitability. But humans did not crumble. They fought. They persisted. They laughed while doing it. A sudden alarm cut through the tension, red lights flaring. The ship shuddered violently, throwing her against the console. Pain shot through her shoulder, but she didn't scream. Pain was temporary. Humans endured. Humans acted. Humans turned every setback into momentum. They fear us, she said, voice low but unwavering. Not because we are strong, not because we are fast, clever, or organized. They fear what we choose to do when there's nothing left to choose. They fear our refusal to bow to inevitability. They fear the chaos we carry inside us, the chaos that becomes creation. The alien's three eyes narrowed, scanning, analyzing, attempting to quantify what it could not. Humans were unpredictable, yes. But more than that, they were resilient in ways no model could anticipate. They took risk when caution demanded retreat, logic when survival demanded obedience, and laughed when despair demanded silence. She moved quickly, overriding failing systems, rerouting energy, rewriting code in real time. Each action was precise, almost effortless in its execution. Every movement screamed of experience, instinct, and something deeper. Something the alien could not name. They think we are fragile, she continued, voice soft but fierce. They see short lives and weak bodies and they assume weakness. But humans endure because we refuse to surrender. We endure because our will is stronger than the void itself. And when we fall, we rise, always. The alien recoiled slightly. Of observation had taught it one rule: do not underestimate unpredictability. But even this warning could not prepare it for human determination. Humans did not simply act, they chose action in defiance of fate. And that choice, that defiance, was terrifying. Another alarm sounded. The ship shook violently. Sparks and debris danced in zero gravity. And yet she smiled. Not the small smile of relief, but the broader, stubborn smile of a being who refused to give in, no matter the odds. They fear us, she repeated almost to herself. Because we are not content with survival, we shape it, we twist it. We turn despair into opportunity. That is why they avoid Earth, why they whisper warnings across the galaxy, why the oldest civilizations steer clear of our sun. It is not strength they fear, it is us. The alien observed, almost mesmerized. Every calculation it ran failed. Every model collapsed. Humans acted outside of expectation, beyond prediction, and with a kind of reckless creativity no algorithm could anticipate. They were alive in a way that reason. She placed her hands on a scorched panel, feeling the hum of energy coursing through it. The ship trembled beneath her, a heartbeat of metal and flame. But she stood firm, eyes locked on the stars beyond, mind racing with solutions, contingencies, possibilities. They think they can intimidate us, she said, voice rising. They think they can outlast us, outthink us, destroy us. But humans are fire. We are noise in the silence. We are chaos made flesh. And chaos cannot be contained. The alien took a cautious step back. It had witnessed civilizations surrender before the inevitable. It had cataloged worlds falling under the weight of entropy. But humans laughed at inevitability, and in that laughter the universe itself seemed uncertain. Her gaze shifted to the viewport, to the swirling expanse of stars beyond. "We are human," she whispered. "And the universe will learn, sooner or later, we are unstoppable." The alien understood, finally, why Earth was avoided, why humans were feared. Not because they were powerful in the conventional sense, but because they chose to be unstoppable. They survived, thrived, and in ways that no immortal species could fully comprehend. And in that understanding, the alien felt something it had never felt before: awe, respect, and fear. Because humans did not stop. The void outside stretched endlessly, cold and indifferent. Stars scattered like shards of ice, distant suns that had burned for eons without care for life, for struggle, for will. Yet inside the small, battered vessel, a human moved with a purpose that all odds, all logic, all expectation. "They think this is the end," she whispered, voice barely audible over the hum of the failing engines. "But we don't do endings, not like this." The alien watched silently from the shadows of the observation deck, its three eyes reflecting the flickering light. It had catalogued thousands of civilizations, worlds with measured in eons, empires built on precision, species that survived by adherence to protocol. None had ever behaved like this. None had ever dared to rewrite their own fate in real time, in the teeth of collapse, in defiance of annihilation. Her hands flew over the damaged controls, rerouting energy, balancing failing systems. Sparks danced, trailing across the metal like fireflies caught in a storm. Pain seared through her arm, but she didn't flinch. Pain was irrelevant. Survival was irrelevant. What mattered was action. What mattered was resolve. What mattered was the human way. Act when all others would hesitate, endure when all others would surrender, defy when all others would obey. "They fear us," she said softly, almost to herself. "Not because we're strong, not because we're fast, not because we have power or weapons. They fear us because we choose when the universe says no. They fear what we become when there's nothing left to cling to but ourselves. They fear human stubbornness, our fire." A sudden tremor shook the vessel. Panels clanged, sparks flew, alarms screamed in unison. Most beings would have panicked, frozen, or fled. She didn't. She adapted. She improvised. She moved faster, thinking harder, reacting smarter than any calculation could predict. The alien recoiled slightly. It had seen worlds crumble, civilizations vanish, empires fall to entropy. Yet here, in front of its unblinking gaze, a single human stood firm, laughing softly as chaos threatened to tear everything apart. That laughter, soft, defiant, unyielding, was a language the alien could not comprehend. "They underestimate us," she said, eyes narrowing, focus sharp as a blade. "They look at flesh and blood, at fragile bones and finite, and they think they understand weakness. But weakness is irrelevant. Humans endure, humans fight. Humans do what is impossible because we refuse not to." The alien's three eyes darted, trying to catalog, trying to predict, trying to calculate. Probability models shattered. Predictions failed. Every outcome collapsed under the weight of one human will. It was more than resistance. It was something primal, something raw. It was defiance turned into survival. Her fingers paused on a failing panel, feeling the hum of energy surging beneath her touch. She took a deep breath, listening to the pulse of the ship, the heartbeat of possibility. Every second mattered. Every decision could mean life or death. And yet she moved with calm, with grace, with unshakable certainty. "They avoid us," she whispered, staring at the stars. "The oldest species in the galaxy, the ones who shaped worlds and ruled centuries, they stay away from Earth. They leave us alone. They warn others to steer clear, not because we are predictable, not because we are powerful, but because we are uncontrollable. They fear what we will do when cornered, when desperate, when there is nothing left but choice." A spark hit the console near her feet, sizzling dangerously. Pain shot up her leg. She laughed, soft and bitter, and kept moving. Humans transformed suffering into momentum. Humans turned fear into fuel. Humans survived where no one else could. The alien recoiled further, almost instinctively. Across eons of observation, it had catalogued adaptation, endurance, strategy. But humans, this species, fragile yet unyielding, acted outside of all precedent. They reshaped reality not by conquest, not by force, but by sheer will. And that terrified even the oldest beings. Her gaze lifted to the viewport. Stars blurred past in streaks of silver and white, the cosmos racing by as if time itself were afraid of the human spirit aboard this battered ship. "We are human," she whispered. "We survive because we must, we endure because we choose to, and we rise because we cannot do otherwise." That terrifies them. The alien finally understood fully why humans were a cautionary tale whispered across galaxies. Not because humans were invincible, not because they could dominate with fleets or weapons, but because humans were impossible to predict, impossible to contain, impossible to break. And in that realization, the alien felt what it had never felt before: awe, reverence, and fear. Humans were unstoppable. The void outside was silent, yet inside the vessel, chaos reigned. Sparks rained across the control panels, fire licking the edges of scorched metal. Every system screamed its protest, alarms wailing in a discordant symphony of destruction. And yet she stood unflinching, eyes locked on the controls, mind racing faster than any computer could follow. "They said we would fail," she whispered, voice calm amid the storm. "They said it was impossible, and yet here we are, still moving, still breathing, still fighting." The alien hovered in the observation deck, its three eyes trained on her. Across, it had catalogued species reactions to annihilation. Panic, desperation, obedience, surrender, these were constants. But humans were unpredictable. Humans were defiant. Humans laughed at despair and turned fear into strategy, chaos into opportunity. A tremor shook the vessel violently. Panels shattered, sparks flew in arcs, and smoke twisted in the zero-gravity air like living shadows. Pain shot through her arm, blood streaking across her skin, yet she did not scream, she did not flinch. Pain was temporary, humans endured, humans adapted, humans chose action over surrender. "They fear us," she murmured, fingers flying across the damaged console. "Not because of strength, not because of weapons, not because of numbers. They fear what we do when nothing is left but will. They fear our refusal to vanish quietly, to obey, to give up. They fear the chaos we carry and the fire we ignite in the darkness." The alien recoiled slightly, struggling to comprehend. Data failed, predictions crumbled, probability collapsed under the weight of human will. Humans acted in ways no model could account for. They logic, expectation, the very universe itself. She activated the emergency stabilizers, energy flaring as systems roared back to life, giving the ship a fragile semblance of stability. Her body shook with exhaustion, her muscles screaming, her lungs burning, but her mind remained clear, focused, precise. Humans did not stop. Humans persevered not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. "They underestimate us," she said, voice low but fierce. "They see flesh and bone, fragile bodies, short, and they call it weakness. But humans endure because we choose to. Humans endure because we refuse to bow to inevitability. And when we fall, we rise, always." The alien's eyes widened. Across countless civilizations, it had never witnessed anything like this. Humans did not merely survive, they thrived in adversity. They turned despair into resolve, chaos into strategy, sacrifice into triumph. And in that, the galaxy's eldest species recognized something they could not fight, could not predict, could not control. A sudden flare of energy shook the ship violently, nearly throwing her across the room. Her hands moved faster, rerouting power, balancing failing reactors, stabilizing the failing engines. Each movement precise, instinctive, almost preternatural. This was not heroism. It was human will made flesh. "They avoid Earth," she whispered, voice trembling slightly, a mixture of exhaustion and defiance. "Not because humans are weak, not because we are fragile, but because we are uncontrollable. We survive when survival is impossible. We endure when the universe says stop. We rise when all odds are against us, and that terrifies them." The alien took a step back. Across centuries, across galaxies, it had never seen a species like this. Not invincible, not flawless, not predictable, but unstoppable. Humans turned the impossible into routine, danger into opportunity, sacrifice into legacy. She glanced at the viewport, seeing stars streak past in blur as the ship hurtled through space. And in that moment, in the face of death and destruction, she smiled. Not triumphantly, not arrogantly, but human, fierce, defiant, unbroken. "They fear us," she said again, softer this time, almost reverently. "And they should, because humans do not stop. Not for pain, not for loss, not for despair, not for death. We rise every time, always." The alien understood finally. Earth was avoided, humans were whispered about in fear, civilizations steered clear. Not because humans were invulnerable, not because they could dominate with fleets or weapons, but because they were impossible to contain. They were unpredictable, defiant, relentless. And as the ship shuddered violently one final time before stabilizing, the alien realized the truth. Humans were not just survivors. Humans were the spark that refused to die. The flame that no darkness could smother. The chaos that even eternity could not tame. Humans were unstoppable. The void outside was endless. Silence stretched across the cosmos like a canvas, indifferent to life, death, hope, or despair. And yet, inside the battered ship, life blazed with a stubborn brilliance no darkness could dim. She stood in the middle of the control room, hands trembling, body aching, blood streaked across skin and metal alike. The ship was damaged beyond repair. Systems flickered, fires burned, alarms screamed, but she was alive. And in that survival, there was a truth the galaxy could not ignore. "They said we would fail," she whispered, voice barely audible above the hum of failing engines. "They said no one could endure this. They said we were fragile. They said we were expendable. But they forgot who we are. They forgot what humans do when all hope is gone." The alien watched from the viewport, three unblinking eyes reflecting her defiance. Across of observation, it had cataloged countless species, worlds rising and falling, empires crumbling into dust. But humans were different. Humans laughed in the face of annihilation. Humans acted when others froze. Humans persisted, even when survival seemed impossible. A tremor shook the vessel. Sparks rained across the floor, panels exploded, and smoke twisted like ghosts through the corridors. Pain stabbed at her body, every muscle screaming for rest. And yet she moved. Fingers flew across scorched panels, rerouting power, stabilizing failing systems, balancing chaos with determination. Humans did not stop. Humans did not surrender. Humans adapted. "They fear us," she murmured almost to herself. "Not because we are strong, not because we are fast, not because we can dominate. They fear what we do when the universe says no. They fear our stubbornness, our defiance, our fire. They fear a species that will not vanish quietly." The alien recoiled slightly, instinctively cataloging probabilities, trying to understand what it could not. Humans were chaotic, unpredictable, impossible to model. They survived where logic predicted failure. They rose when inevitability demanded collapse. They acted without reason, guided only by will, courage, and something older than fear itself. She glanced at the viewport, eyes catching the streak of distant stars as they blurred past. She thought of every human who had come before her, every sacrifice, every laugh, every tear, every act of courage, that expectation. All those lives had led to this moment. A final system reboot flared to life. The ship stabilized, not perfectly, not safely, but alive. And in that survival she smiled, not triumphantly, not arrogantly, but human, fierce, defiant, unbroken. "They avoid Earth," she whispered, voice soft but resolute. "They whisper warnings, they steer clear, they fear what we carry inside us, not our weapons, not our numbers, not our speed, but our spark, our will, our refusal to surrender. They fear the chaos that becomes creation, they fear the unstoppable." The alien understood, finally. Earth was not just a planet, humans were not just a species. Humanity was a force, a living, breathing anomaly that no power, no logic, no immortal civilization could fully contain. They were alive in a way the universe itself could not anticipate. She breathed deeply, listening to the hum of the ship, feeling the pulse of energy that refused to die, sensing the fragile line between life and oblivion. And in that line she felt the truth. Humans were never merely survivors. Humans were fire. Humans were noise in the silence. Humans were the heartbeat of a universe that had forgotten how to truly live. "They fear us," she repeated one last time, almost reverently. "And they should, because humans do not stop. Not for fear, not for pain, not for loss, not for death. We rise, we endure. We endure when all else falls. We endure because we are human." Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, indifferent, yet somehow brighter, somehow alive, reflected in her eyes. Inside, she straightened, weary but unbroken. Humanity's story, one of courage, defiance, and fire, had written itself once more against the void. And somewhere across the galaxy, civilizations whispered warnings, navigators steered clear, and the galaxy's oldest species shivered in a fear they could never fully name. Because humans were unstoppable. And in that understanding, the universe paused, if only for a heartbeat, to witness a species that refused to vanish quietly.